one of our challenges is that, I'll just say, one of my ambivalences is this. On the one hand, there's a whole lot of very robust theological reflection that we want to do. But on the other hand is the kind of emergency, catastrophic danger, that we heard about last night. And living in that tension is a struggle. And this track, I think, and the purpose of this larger track, and then this section, did I just get that right? Is this, that you can keep proposing changes that need to be done for the environmental catastrophe, but if people's entire brain set, their whole mindset, theological, philosophical, political, economic, if that whole brain space in which they live precludes any of those solutions, precludes even seeing this reality, then you can keep proposing great solutions and they just bounce off people like, with no effect at all. So I think there's this realization among increasing numbers of people that to save the planet, you actually have to liberate people's thinking, and you have to open up new space for them to think. On the other hand, the allure of the thinking is sometimes so fascinating that you can get involved in that and never get back to the action. So I just want to name that tension where we live, and that's that's a reality. For that reason, and one of the other reasons for setting these tracks, I think, is some basic adult education, which is that adults learn more when they're talking than when they're listening, which sort of invalidates a huge amount of traditional education. Or adults learn more when they're in conversation, when there's a back and forth. So I think part of the idea of these sections is that we want to create space for people to be engaging as well. So what we'd like to do is have you introduce yourself, and if there's something you would like to get out of this time together, a question you'd like to ask, tell us the question now. We won't deal with it right now. Or a subject you'd like to discuss, or just some experience you'd like to have, please tell us. If there's a topic you bring that you're passionate about relating to a new way for a new day, especially thinking about Christianity and the challenges to theological reframing that we have to engage with the ecological crisis, as Austin beautifully just exemplified for us, then mention that and we'll get it down, and then we will make sure that we massage our plans for the next couple of days to encounter those, to make space for those things. Good deal? Let's start at the back.
Dan Bryant, I'm actually a graduate of Claremont in 1984, and so a couple of years out, I jumped at the chance to kind of re-immerse in the world of John Cobb when he was teaching a course at ILIF with a guy I'd never heard of by the name of Herman Daly. And so I got a pre-published version of For the Common Good for that course, spending the week with the two of them in Aspen. It was quite an incredible experience. My interest, another big follower, I'm a big follower of John Dominic Crossan, who I heard once in an event say, and I don't remember the guy who wrote the book of how the Irish saved civilization, right? And Crossan, who's Irish, quite seriously said his goal is to save the church in the work that he is doing. And I'm trying to put that together with this, that I really see that, not about saving the church, but saving the world, and how can the church be in that role that we truly are contributing in a concrete way to that, and coming up with that theological and theoretical framework to enable us to move to that next step. Such a big task, I don't even know where to begin.
And for a living,
Well, I'm a pastor of Downtown Historic Church in Eugene, and also the head of a nonprofit that builds micro houses for the homeless.
Fantastic. Interesting.
Beth Bojarski, am the executive director of Camp Stevens, which is the Episcopal Camp and Retreat Center in Southern California. I've been there not quite 3 years. I'm originally from the East Coast. So, initially came to this conference because I saw it publicized and had quoted many of the names in Master's work, and so my personal interest was piqued because of that. And I would say more practically, I'm really interested. I'm fairly new still to Camp Stevens, but I'm following someone who was there for 40 years and working to sort of reroute us in the Episcopal Church. So as an Episcopal camp and retreat center, we do really incredible things, a lot with environmental sustainability and community living, have organic gardens, are really intentional about our food, and I think do a lot of amazing things. And my hope is to add to that a real essence of holy hospitality and focus on the other, but then also to reroot ourselves in the Episcopal Church. My observation is that for the last number of decades, Camp Stevens, intentionally or not, has actually worked to sort of separate from the church and has become really secular. And this morning's keynote, she said something along the lines of, what I heard was being rooted in the church, or like looking for world royalty, opens up possibilities of beauty and community, but it also makes, separation, like all of those things become more pronounced. But I'm willing to risk that, and I'm working. I need to figure out how to get other staff on board, or figure out how to move on without this. So I'm sort of at a breaking point there, and want to do that gracefully, and in a way that honors the tradition and the people. I work with a lot of sort of spiritual but not religious 20-something nuns, some of whom grew up in the church and some who didn't, and they're very threatened, I find, by conversation about religion and spirituality. So that's sort of right on that cusp. But that's, I would say, my more practical takeaway is hoping, and I think because Camp Stevens is in many ways an ecological civilization, we have this there's something amazing there, and I just want to root it. So.
How far is it from here?
About 2.5 hours, I would think. It's in Julian, if anyone's familiar with California.
What direction is that?
Apple Country.
South.
Yeah.
South, yeah, it's Apple Country. It's in the mountains of San Diego County.
We're going to need to move.
Yes, sorry.
I can make this really easy. You wrote a book years ago, Why I'm I could have written that book. Except for you wrote it so much better than I did. But I am, kind of one of those guys who's come from all of those different backgrounds, and most recently became a very outspoken universalist, big Rob Bell fan, and also charismatic and all of those other things that are kind of, I wouldn't say mainline, but evangelical. So I'm interested, like Dan over there, in saving the church. How do we get the church on board to get out of its mindset of it's all going to burn anyway? And that kind of sums it up.
My name is Andrew Ho, and I'm here mostly just for personal interest and curiosity about ecological theology and metaphysics. Long before I'd ever heard of Whitehead or Cobb, or when I was still a right-wing evangelical, I had always felt that I was one with nature in a way that would make my evangelical peers cringe a little bit at how mystic I was about it. So it's just an interesting topic.
I'm Bo. I am a pastor on the west side of LA at a United Methodist Church that started a new emergent gathering, and I help coordinate that. I am the co-host of Hungry Christianity with Tripp, and last summer I put out a 6-part series called Homegrown Christianity about the eco concerns. And the feedback, because I'm from an evangelical charismatic background, and I'm a student now at Claremont, and it was amazing. I put it through a 6-part series, and all of my non-evangelical friends were like, boring. This is like Ecology 101. When are you going to get to the good stuff? We already knew all this. And all my former evangelical friends or people who were still in that evangelical world were like, so you're a radical now? And so my concern is bridging that gap.
I'm Tim Burnett, and what to say? I guess I'm perpetually, intrigued and sort of compelled with this conversation surrounding eco-theology, but also process. Process was a kind of a good word to me in a time when I needed theology reframed, and so yeah, I'm just very interested in the whole spirituality, theology, missiology game, and now working with the Disciples of Christ, and actually Tripp now over at a new project in Redondo called The Hatchery, and so we're trying to rethink kind of like graduate cohort learning with a kind of like missiological bent. So it's like transforming theology from kind of the mind, like you said, Brian, to kind of like this practical, what does it look like to work with a common bit. So yeah, excited to be here.
Austin, you want to say anything else?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm from Drew University. I actually just moved back from New Jersey this week. I drove across the country over the last week. And I'm living back in California again. And I'm 2 years into my program, so in the exam stage. And Lisa is one of my colleagues from Drew who was in here. And yeah, I'm here. A lot of my questions are already implicit and explicit in my paper, but I'm here mostly just to sort of extend the work that I've already been doing, eco-theology and eco-philosophy, and sort of finding new ways to expand that work.
Eric?
I'm Eric. I'm a youth pastor and hospice chaplain in the United Methodist Church. I'm hoping the process has been really helpful for me finding a new way in Christianity, reframing of sorts. But I'm really wondering how I can have conversations about these topics with my evangelical, conservative, Rush Limbaugh loving family and friends without needing to go drink copious amounts of alcohol. That is my challenge.
You're not alone.
So my name is Lisa Gasson-Gardner. I am a second-year doctoral student at Drew University. I work with Catherine Keller, but actually have not read very much Whitehead, which makes me a little bit strange. And I have a lot of questions this weekend. I myself grew up in an evangelical church and don't own that often, but this weekend I will. And when I told people that I was going to be on this track, they said, "Oh, you're with the evangelicals." And so I'd like to talk about that and what that means. And a lot of my questions have to do with, Austin and I often talk about the difference between causation and correlation, because in the kind of theological circles I run in, certain theology gets blamed for certain ethical problems, including this idea that like supernatural theology, I mean, absolutely, like he's right that it has been connected, but is it necessarily connected? Is that the solution to the problem? I don't think so. And so a lot of my questions are along that line this weekend.
My name is Matt Smith. I'm a United Methodist pastor in Sacramento. We started a church called The Table there in 2010, and it was at a historic church, around 20 people, and mostly my grandparents' age, and that's kind of shifted into young, very artistic, phenomenal music space. And so one of the questions I think I bring is around us, there was that church that was dying, and then I can throw a rock a couple times and get to 3 other Methodist churches that are down to 15, 20 people, buildings that are dilapidated. And so what I'm wondering about on some level is the parallel crises, the one that we have heard about just last night and this morning. And then also there's economists in the United Methodist Church last week that said 15 years to turn the ship around. And so there's just, that parallel feels really striking to me right now, that as a denomination we're saying we're nearing an end. And I was really struck. I went to Catherine Keller's talk before this, and just her language around grief and hope. And so far for me, like what I think I'm actually looking for is a little bit more of the arts and music and how the community uses these to allow people to feel, because so much of what has happened for me in the last 24 hours or so has been like very abstracted. And I just know the people that I live with need music and art, and I'm wondering about how does this move together for a new way. So that's me.
Excellent. Your first name?
Matt.
I'm Richard Bunce, and I guess I would have to say that given our concern for the world and for the church. The core of it seems to be theological. And I'm glad we're all kind of struggling together. It's so crucial. And I have to ask myself this question: what is the corollary to Paul's zeal as he went through the Mediterranean world, pronouncing that, that grace transcends law? I mean, what is it that we theologically deeply believe transcends? What is that, and what is it transcending? We need that gospel. And my background, I went to Princeton Theological Seminary in the 1960s, and my ministry has taken various forms. But interestingly, the great guru of the time was Karl Barth. And Karl Barth's theology in reaction to modernism was truly an interventionist God. God did intervene. God is a powerful intervening God. And so that's on the one side. On the other side, when I got back to California from Princeton, my campus pastor at UC Berkeley, alma mater, introduced me to process theology. And he was very upset that I hadn't even heard of it at Princeton. And Princeton had enough trouble dealing with liberation theology. There wasn't any room for something as abstract as process theology, or at least, if not abstract, new. These theological issues, I hope during this 3-day period we can come away having made some progress in knowing better what is the good news.
Not a bad question. So I'll make a closing observation.
I'm from Nashville area, Tennessee, and I grew up a Southern Baptist, and some of the first seeds that I remember of an ecological consciousness was, I think Professor there was Glenn Stassen. That was in the late 70s, and then 10 years later, after that MDiv degree there, and had some youth ministry, I was going on communications and went to United Theological Seminary, Metro Seminary. And sometime while I was there, I bought the book For the Common Good, and didn't know John Cobb and Herman Daly at the time, and started reading it, and at that time it wasn't what I expected it from the title, but I didn't read the subtitles, so that's why it wasn't what I expected. And then so I kind of set that aside for 25 years, and heard it mentioned again in an interview that Michael Dowd did. No, it was Christian Piat did with Philip Clayton. And I said, that title. And so I looked on my shelf, and there it was. And so I've been reading that in the past couple of weeks. And so I'm looking forward to hearing Herman Daly. But the main turning point that brought me here was like last fall. I read Naomi Klein's book, This Changes Everything, Capitalism versus Climate. And then it took me a long time to get through that because I kept stopping and writing things and talking to people. And then I remember a few years before that, I had read a book by Brian, Everything Must Change. And I remember talking about that, at pretty much length, and went back and looked at the bibliography and went down to the Divinity School Library and started looking for some of those names, David Corton, and also found Larry Rasmussen, who's also here. I'm going to talk to him and have him talk with him on video. And so that eco-theology stuff, that's pretty much what I've been reading, and I've been reading all the little branches, the peak oil and the limits to growth, and I've also been reading McKibben's book, Deep Economy. And so I've been thinking about a name. I have a blog called theological.org for the past 13 years. And a couple of years ago, I added another domain name to it, Occupy Theology, and so I was interested in talking to people about theology and occupied with it. And I interviewed Brian among some other people at the Wild Goose Festival that following December. And then this has sort of arisen as a branch of that, and there's a lot of intersections because some of the causes of both crises are the same. So I came up with another name, eco-ecclesia, which I was encouraged to various people for this conference and for ongoing discussion about economics, ecology, and the church. So eco-ecclesia. So that's like 3 ecos. They're all from the ecos Greek word. And and I've since reading Naomi Klein's book and then listening to discussion about that and talking about theologically, it's hit me in a way personally that it never has before. So it changed everything, for me. So.
Well, good. Closing comment, and then I think it's time for a break in just a minute. So here's what I sense. All of us are just interested in this intersection in general, but we have a lot of us who are from evangelical backgrounds, and we're trying to figure out how do we communicate, how do we evangelize evangelicals with a understanding of the gospel that will actually save them from being the destroyers of the planet. I'll tell you an anecdote about that in a minute. Others of us are from more mainline settings, and we have another set of issues of challenging people and rousing people in action. And maybe all of us can be conscious that we want the other folks to get what they need as well as us to get what we need in that. Does that sound like a good summary? I think some of us have our own struggles in theology, or probably all of us have our own theological issues. We're trying to work this stuff out. So all of that is fair game these next couple of days. And we just need, Tripp and I need to really ask you to go after what you want. And where there's something you want, please ask about it, press for it, and we will really listen to you. I have to be careful because I don't want to violate confidences here, but I'll tell you a quick anecdote before we take a break about evangelicals. So that's my background. And I can't remember what year it was, but some of you may have heard of something called the Sandy Cove Conference, which was the first attempt to get evangelicals on board caring about the environment, especially climate change. And I was so happy to be invited to be part of the Sandy Cove Conference in Chesapeake Bay, Maryland, near where I lived. And I thought, I'm finally going to get to meet the other evangelicals who really care about the environment. And I don't know, there's 40, 50, 60 people there. And I think there might have been 3 people who knew anything about the environment. What I realized it was actually getting evangelical leaders together to try to convince them that climate change was a real problem. And they had Sir John Houghton, who was at that time the head of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, who led what is the biggest scientific research project in the history of humanity. I mean, in terms of human hours of research. When people say the science is inconclusive, they're just stupid. They're just wrong. There is no bigger scientific project ever in terms of human hours of research that's been put into a problem than this one. And Sir John Houghton got up there with his slides, and by the time he was done, nobody could have any question other than that this was real. And it was a stunning 45 minutes to watch him do his thing. And so the people who organized the event said, okay, well, what we'd like to do is to try to come up with a statement that we could all issue from this event that says this really, really matters. And again, I'm trying to be very politic here, but somebody raised his hand and said, I'm sorry, I'm not authorized to sign anything on behalf of my organization. And in fact, if I sign something, I'll lose my job. And I can guarantee if you come out with a statement, my denomination, which is a very significant evangelical will oppose everything this organization does. Because it will appear to be for big government and we're for free enterprise. And it will, and all the kind of things you typically hear. So at that moment, all the momentum ground to a halt, and the rest of the event was basically a counseling session with this one guy we're sort of saying, what will it take to bring your people along? And all the momentum of the other people stopped. And now, what's it going to take to bring our most recalcitrant member along? So we have a break, and I walked up to Sir John. I said, you are a patient man. I said, it must be so frustrating to present all this and then just see one economic issue, big political economic issue. This will bring about big government, and we're for free enterprise and unregulated markets. It's not even a theological issue, you know. This brings the whole thing to a standstill. And Sir John, I wish I could imitate his British accent, but he says, I have no choice but to be patient. He said, even the Russians have come along to recognize this is a great problem. But 30% of the greenhouse gases in the world are produced by the Americans. So even if the entire rest of the world does their job, all their efforts are discounted by 30% if the Americans don't get on board. And he said the Americans won't get on board as long as the Republican Party is in power. The Americans won't get on board unless the Republicans get on board, and the Republicans won't get on board unless the evangelicals get on board. He said, frankly, the way that we see it in the rest of the world is that the future of the planet is held hostage by American evangelicals. There it is.
And it all boils down.
Wow.
It all boils down to money.
Well, but suddenly that's, you might think, well, this is just a little track for, evangelical, but this is a big deal for bringing about change in this area. And it's a really, really big deal. So we've got our work cut out for us. The comment that you ended up with, that from I think a secular, non-theistic person, that really the way forward has to involve an alliance of believing and non-believing, or secular and religious people who share some common sense, that in many senses of that word, that we have to work together for the common good. That is a pretty bottom line statement, and we'll put a lot of time together.